Hi guys, I welcome you all to the next lecture in our anthropology lecture series. So today we are doing this anthropological theories. In diffusion we have already completed our British school we have completed, right? German school I had given you the basic idea, the introductory video I have told you, but we'll again do it today, and I will try to do American school also today itself, right? So we'll be finished with diffusion today. So yeah, let's get started now. These were the three people basically, right? So in the Austro-German school we had talked about the culture crisis theory, the culture circle theory. So it was more refined because they had tried to plug in all the problems of the anti-evolutionist heliocentric pan-Egyptian British school, right? So they had their own problems, but let's look at it now. So basically now the background, they were not anti-evolutionist, they were not very extreme in their ideologies. They tried to show the path of diffusion, they tried to tell us how the material and non-material aspects diffuse, right? So for this they had a methodology. We were talking about three people: Fritz Grabener, William Schmidt, and Leo Fribinus, right? These three people we were talking about. So the methodology of this school was, let's go back, just see this. Diffusion इन्होंने बोला must be understood in terms of time and space. That means वो थोड़ा holistically study करने की कोशिश कर रहे थे. They were trying to holistically study diffusion. Concerned with both material non-material part, rejected heliocentric, they also never attempted to show the path of diffusion. This is going to come in the criticism that even though they tried to, but they could not show, right? But they were more refined in its approach. So this was the background. Now let's see the methodology. So in the methodology, mostly the work in Austro-German school was done by Fritz and Schmidt, right? They had tried to, and in दोनों में से भी it's Fritz Grabener who has given a lot of methodological work, ठीक है? Leo Fribinus has helped to give evidences to further prove the point of Fritz Grabener and Schmidt, right? Like most similarly in the British school also, the idea Smith के ideas को with in his book Children of the Sun, Perry ने support किया था. It is more or less similar, okay? Similar only, okay? So abhi now Fritz Grabener is saying that there are two ways you can see how diffusion has occurred, okay? So they are trying to show diffusion occurring through now evidences ki this is, if these things are there, then you can say that diffusion has occurred. So first is the criteria of form, ठीक है? And the second is criteria of number. So now I would need a page for this to explain you. Just try and understand what I am trying to tell you. So they took examples of Africa. Basically they had done field work in Africa, Western African cultures, then your Polynesians, Melanesians, Indonesian cultures, then even these whole were the regions they had done their study, right, primarily. So what they saw in, especially in African cultures, that most of them had bow and arrow culture, right? So they had their own bows and arrows, okay? For example, this is one culture's bow and arrow, this is the second culture's bow and arrow, okay? We are just now bow and arrow is needed to hunt, right? And hunting and gathering mate is important. So in our evolution also, when we were studying that all over the world these technologies grew as and when the time was there. Everybody was using the bow and arrow, everybody were using the plow once the agriculture came in, right? So har jagah the sickle shape is this only, right? Sickle would always shape like this. So it's not like ki it is changing in the cultures, right? थोड़ा बहुत here and there can be possible, but then again हम बोले boat का shape भी would be similar in all the cultures, so the shape is not going to change. Yes, the decoration on the shape, for example कोई अपना flag यहाँ लगा सकता है, ठीक है, flag या कुछ भी, कुछ ऐसे ऐसे decoration डाल सकता है, right? Somebody might like to put some other decoration, right? So these small things can differ, but then the bigger things would not change, right? That means the shape of the arrow would be the same, right? Because it has a purpose to serve. So all those things doesn't change. So now how to see कि diffusion occurred or whether they have all invented that bow and arrow? You can see from other things. For example, you know the form cannot change, you know, many things in this cannot change. For example, in the arrow, shape and all is going to be the same. But he saw that in African cultures, many cultures attached a red thread to it. They attached a red thread to their bow. Now this is not giving any functional utility to the bow. अब ये thread हटा दोगे, then also it is going to work the same, right? It is not going to make any difference. So that means because this is also taken as it is, that means diffusion has occurred. Because अगर उनको, if they had invented it on its own, so they would not have put this red thread, or they might have put another color or another design. They might have put some dot design, some other design, right? Why the red thread only? This shows कि when everything else is the same and you cannot compare on that basis, then you see the things that are non-utilitarian, right? उनके base पे you can say कि whether this was borrowed or what, right? This utilitarian यहाँ पे नहीं आएगा, right? So that is what it is. I'll just correct this. So this is how they were trying to make you understand that by certain decoration, by orientation, for example, if they have also put this color and some other boat has also put the same design, right? So then you can say maybe yes, because decoration need not to be same, right? So this was criteria of form. That means you look at these aesthetic things and try to understand ki yes, diffusion must have occurred. And the second thing is criteria of numbers. Now if there are two cultures and they have a lot of things that are similar in them, for example, we have taken the example of this bow and arrow. This bow and arrow is same. Along with them, a lot of pottery is same. That means they also are making similar kind of pottery. This design is there. And the other culture is also having a similar design only, okay? They also are having a similar design. Then this culture are having a bucket with this handle like that. They are also having a bucket with same handle, okay? Then they are having another kind of big bartans. They are also having these kind of bartans, right? So as many as if there are more number of items that are similar in two cultures, it means that diffusion has taken place. ठीक है? अब if you have to see that in Indian culture or in Indian, if you have to talk about our constitution also, a lot of things are similar to that of Britain's parliamentary culture, right? So why it is? Because we have had a culture which had a connect with the Britishers for a long time. So we have borrowed a lot of things from their culture, from their constitution, not constitution, their political working, right? Working style. So this is what he is talking about कि दो चीज़ें देखो. One thing was कि whether the form, the criteria of form matches. That means कि if the things are aesthetically, orientation wise similar, and then how many things are similar, because how many things is going to help you see कि whether diffusion has taken place or not. ठीक है? So this was one thing. And then they talked about historical connections also and diffusion. So उन्होंने बोला कि historical connect भी ज़रूरी है. For example, I gave you the example of British and India. ठीक है, India is a lot similar to that of a British culture because we have a historical connect with them. We are not very similar to the Russian culture, even though they have a very strong bonding with India. They are a long they are age old friend of India, right? But then also our cultures, our people, there is a disconnect there. ठीक है, but even if as much as we don't like the Britishers in the time when they used to rule us, a lot still is common between us, right? So that is what it is talking about कि historical connections भी important होते हैं. So this is one thing. And इन्होंने बोला कि material non-material aspects you should see both of them. That means diffusion will take place not in the material culture but non-material culture. जैसे today's India, the Western culture has more or less come with the globalization, and उससे पहले you can say with the Britishers ruling over us, right? So Leo Frobenius did not contribute theoretically. That means he did not give any this methodological part and theory and all, but he did find out the evidences between Melanesian, Indonesian, Western African cultures. That means he worked on these things. He found out a lot of similarities. You can say there were bow and arrows. There were different examples that he saw that a lot of things were similar in these cultures, and then he told ki this is how the diffusion must have occurred in these cultures because their utensils, their items are a lot similar to each other, right? So he did not give any theory, but he gave those examples which I showed you, right? So this was the methodology. एंड इस स्कूल को कल्चर क्रेसेस भी बोलते हैं बिकॉज इन्होंने कल्चर सर्कल की बात किया. दैट मीन्स दे वर सेइंग कि इफ दिस इज द कल्चर the core area, then surrounding areas it will get diffused, right? But then they could not define any culture circle. That means they did not draw any culture circle, they did not give any example of it. So इस वे में this was the criticism that even though they gave the culture crisis concept, but they could not even draw a single culture circle. They could not show any diffusion with evidences in this culture circle. ठीक है, but important thing is that they both they gave importance to both evolution and diffusion. That means somewhere down the line multi centric theory दे रहे हैं ये भी. That means कि evolution more than one place पे हो रही है, right? This was the major criticism of British school because वो थोड़ा heliocentric था. That means one center. They are saying multiple center पे evolution हो रही है and उसके आगे पीछे multiple जगह पे diffusion भी हो रही है. ठीक है, there are multiple evolutionary centers and multiple diffusionary centers. So gave importance to both. And he said migration of trait can be understood with historical data. I have told you. That means कितना contact रहा है उनके बीच में. That is why it is also called culture historic school also, and it is also called culture district school because multiple centers हैं. So they are calling these as small districts and उसके आगे पीछे diffusion is taking place. Okay, so I hope you understand the school. Criticism में भी we have talked that even though they had talked about culture crisis, but not even a single culture circle was established. First thing. Second thing, they wanted to not be conjecturalist. That means they wanted to show with evidence, right? And they didn't want to assume anything. But even then they also assumed a lot of things because as I said, not even a single culture circle established. That means उन्होंने भी evidence नहीं दिया. So that means their theory was also based on a lot of conjecturalism, right? Then even they were talking about non-material culture का diffusion, but they also could not show any examples for non-material culture का diffusion. We are only talking about the boats का bow and arrow, boats, mugs, utensils, items. Only these are only material parts of a culture. Non-material में तो they did not give any example. And then they failed to show the path and cause. That means they are saying diffusion is occurring, diffusion occurs, but then how it occurs, why it occurs, why the diffused items get accepted, why are they not rejected. For example, if this red thread is there, why the other culture will also put this red thread, why is this going to happen, ye they could not define. ठीक है, although it was a lot more better in methodology as compared to the British school. So now let's start with the American school. American school mein there is like Franz Boas, we have already talked about his ideas. Then we have Clark Wissler and Kroeber. So Clark Wissler and Kroeber we will read today, right? So Franz Boas is put here because he also talked about the cultural relativism and historical particularism. That means he was also trying to talk about ki a culture is developed in its own geographical, climatic, right, socio-cultural settings. So he also gave the idea of culture area. That means it's in its unique settings every culture is developed. So that is why he is also associated with this school, right? So about him we have read. So now let's see what American school is saying. This was even better, even more sophisticated as compared to the austro-german school in its whole thing, because it came after that. Then it was influenced by German school, so they tried to plug in the loopholes of the German school. And the link between German school and American school was Franz Boas, because as you know, Franz Boas he did a lot of work in America, but he was a Jewish German person, so then he was the link between both. So this school, now this is the picture of Clark Wissler. This school explained the reasons of diffusion. So again, see, the points is criticism हो जाता है वो अलग चीज़ है, but they all were trying to do the same thing. They were all trying to explain why diffusion happened. They all were trying to show diffusion in both material, non-material aspect, right? So basic ideas तो same ही है. क्रिटिसिज्म जब आता है तो हमको पता चलता है ओके दे वर ऑल्सो अनेबल टू शो द मटीरियल नॉन मटीरियल कल्चर में. सी इवन ऑल ऑफ देम कुड नॉट एक्सप्लेन नॉन मटीरियल कल्चर का डिफ्यूजन, राइट? देन path of diffusion they could not show. So even though this is the criticism, but that is the whole basis कि वो लोग आए and they tried to give their ideas, their theories, but then even many of them in every school failed, right? British maybe they could not explain, then Austro-German maybe they could not explain, and even American may they will fail, ठीक है? So but they all came up with the ideas of explaining the same thing. So core idea नहीं change हो रहा है. For that is the very reason they are also put in the same school of diffusionism, right? अगर ideas बहुत different होते तो फिर वो अलग school में भी होते, right? Ideas are the same only, ठीक है? But then they took a step forward. जो culture circles की बात कर रहे थे Austro-German school वाले, the culture circle that they were talking about, they took it a step further by introducing the term culture area and drawing the culture circles. So they were the ones who actually drew a culture circle. So even though this term was given by O.T. Mason, it was developed by Clark Wissler. ठीक है? Now I will show you how this culture circle thing is happening. So before reading this, let me just take you to the okay. So let's try and understand the cultures, the whole methodology. Okay, now I'm teaching you the methodology of American school. So let us understand that this is roughly a geographical area. Okay, this is a geographical area and it has many cultures, right? Because just for example, if you take the example of India also, India is such a big place, but we are one today, right, in terms of territory, but there are so many cultures that are between us, right? So even in one area, or you can take USA also, it is made up of so many small states and small cultures, you can say, right? Even in like 10, 15, 20, 25 kilometers cultures change, right? There are differences and there are similarities. So why am I grouping this geographical area as one is because in this geographical areas, even though there are different cultures, they have certain similarities. So broadly you can, if you have to take a bird's eye view, you can say they are almost all the same, but then thoda bahut here and there will be there. ठीक है? And now these all cultures are continuously interacting with each other. Let me change the color. Yes, let me make it with yellow. Okay, yes. So but they are already contacting with each other. ठीक है? Let me just draw, तब तक you can just revise, right? And this is also interacting with all of them. So basically what is happening, if you will see, I have made all the cultures at the periphery and one is at the core. So the one which is at the core is called, okay, white, say I'll just write it with the white only so that it's visible to you. The one which is at the core is called the culture center. So basically what Clark Wissler says is that there is, in every geographical area there are many cultures, but all the cultures have one culture center. This is the culture center from where all the traits, emerge in its pristine form. That means the purest, the oldest form of a trait will come from this culture center, and then there will be other culture area, the culture other cultures भी रहेंगे उसमें, ठीक है, which they will interact with each other, and this whole was the culture area का concept. So इसने क्या बोला? इसने बोला if you take a bird's eye view, all they are similar only, but then the reason for their similarity is that they will have a culture center which controls all the other cultures politically, socially, culturally, all that ways. This culture center will control all of them, and here in this culture center the traits are emerging in the pristine form from where it is diffusing to the other cultures. ठीक है? इससे from this culture it will go to these cultures, right? ठीक है? And it's not that only there is diffusion between one culture area. Other culture areas can also diffuse things. ठीक है? So if this is one culture area, this is culture area 1, this is culture area 2, this is culture area 3, they all are interacting also, which will all have their own culture centers. ठीक है? So I hope you have now understood the whole concept. Now let's go back to it. So American school ने बोला there'll be a culture area. There'll be a culture area. In this culture area, number of groups are living together. Number of groups are living together that show cultural similarity. Traits typically appear in the pristine form. Okay, sorry, this line had to be with this. Culture center. Traits typically appear in their pristine form from this culture center. ठीक है? And it gets diffused to the other cultures. Now if you have to take an example, in India there were anthropologists who studied the culture of Gaya, Bihar. ठीक है? Gaya, Bihar जो है, you can say it was the you can say the cradle of civilization of Hinduism. Hindu cultures, even the Buddhism started somewhere in Gaya, right? Gaya has a very old traditional links with the culture. Even today people visit Gaya, right? There is a different culture only वहाँ पे there are Gaya के पंडित्स होते हैं, right? Then there are pujas that takes place, right? So you go to those religious sacred temples, and there you can see the culture which is mostly followed in the North India. it will be found in the most pristinest way in that गया, right? वहाँ से इवन आज भी अगर हमको अपने रूट्स को फॉलो करने का मन करेगा तो गया वुड बी वन सच प्लेस वेयर एवरीबडी वुड वांट टू गो, बिकॉज यू नो दैट उसका कितना हिस्टोरिकल लिंक है, राइट? हिस्टोरिकली वो कितना रिच एरिया है, उसमें कितना ज़्यादा कल्चर का, you know, it has so much of culture there, right? So this is what they are talking about, if you understand, right? So now एक बात तो हो गई ये, how culture, what is a culture area? It's a geography where there are cultures, they are interacting with each other and they have similarities and they have a culture center which controls the other cultures and the traits typically appear in its pristine form, ठीक है? And not only the traits spread to own culture but other cultures also. That means one culture can also interact to the other cultures, right? They will interact with each other like that, ठीक है? And then apart from culture area, they also gave a concept of age area. Now what was age area? They said not only look at how, you know, it's spreading, just also look at how vast it has spread. How vast it has spread, matlab, for example, if I say if this is a area and a culture is spread only till this much place, ठीक है? And if this is the area and the culture is spread to whole of this area, so of course if a culture is spread to so much of area, that it must have taken time to spread to this area, right? That means this culture must, this trait must be very old, that is why it has spread to so much area in the time, because एक trait को spread होने में a trait will take time to get spread, ठीक है? And the area it covers will show how old is the trait, because if a trait has to spread it will take a lot of time. So he is saying look at the area or the expanse where the trait is spread. So if it spread on a larger area, that means it is very old and it diffused very in very old times. And if it is spread to smaller area, that means the trait is relatively newer and it is not very old like the other one, right? So I hope you understand. Now let's look at the evaluation and criticism. So even though they were superior to austro-german school, ठीक है, because they were superior because they tried एक second, okay, sorry, evaluation पे हम आएंगे, बस एक चीज़ रह गई है. तो हमने इस पे तो बात कर ली कि कल्चर सर्कल और कल्चर एरिया की हमने बात कर ली. अब now he even gave an evidence for it. Now he tried to show with evidence how to draw a culture area, ठीक है? This concept तो he gave कि this is how it is going to spread between different cultures, this all तो we understand, and he tried to draw it also. Now I'll show you how, because these were Americans, so they, what they did, they took the area of the area of America. For example, I am loosely drawing the map of America, do not, right, bash me if it is not nice, ठीक है? For example, this is America. They tried to compartmentalize the whole America based on food choices or the kind of food that they grow. For example, if I have to take the example, obviously on the coastal sides there will be fishing communities, so a lot of fishing communities you will find in the coastal regions, right, of North Pacific and all, ठीक है? Whereas if you go to up in the Eskimo wala Alaska wala region where the Eskimos and all live, there you will find the culture of a caribou. Caribou, you can say it's a antelope kind of a thing, ठीक है? So Eskimos या अलास्के वाले रीजन में यू विल फाइंड कैरिबूज, ठीक है? देन इन द ग्रेट प्लेन्स, ठीक है, ग्रेट प्लेन्स in the middle part you will find that there is the culture of you can say Great Plains में you will find let me see guys, it's bison. Yeah, I was not able to remember it. So it's bison in the Great Plains, right? So according to these food choices, and then there was intensive agriculture. So in many places there was agriculture also happening. Agriculture, you can say it was happening in Mexico and all. So I'll write it here, Mexico. ठीक है, तो आप यहाँ पे कर लो कि this whole area was agriculture. And then he gave two more things, maize. I'll write it with different color. Maize and seeds, wild seeds. Okay, so based on different areas, because obviously every place there will be different kind of resources. ठीक है, not every place will have the same geography, same climate, same type of topography to cultivate or generate similar food, right? So every place will have their own culture based on their food items. So this is how he tried to show the culture areas. So he is saying, even though if you take a bird's eye view, सारा USA you will mostly एक जैसा culture है. In whole USA you will find a similar culture, but when you see deep into it, you will find 6 food areas, food cultures, okay, which are interacting with them. And on this they tried to show, they constructed a culture circle. So I hope it is clear. So this was their evidence. They tried to show with evidence. This is just a picture for descriptive purposes. It has nothing to do with, just मुझे अच्छी लगी that you know this picture was also showing the differentiation based on certain items that is present over there. So I just put it. But Clark Wissler did this differentiation, or the culture area he drew only with 6 food items: bison, caribou, salmon, fish, wild seed, maize and agriculture. So this was their evidence, and they showed ki how to draw a culture area, right? क्योंकि austro-german school, even though he had talked about it, but then they did not even draw a single culture circle. So it was a step ahead. They tried to show the culture area, and they tried to show how this culture area works also, and then they drew also one culture circle, right? So superior tha to austro-german. Then it gave more evidences. Of course we saw a lot of examples, right? Then they showed how to show the culture circle area, but even this looks very static and narrow, because only one culture circle they could draw, and that too based on food. ठीक है, so it does not look very scientific or very, the evidence was not proper, and it was not like we can say ki it was enough to say ki yes, the theory holds ground. So static है, थोड़ा सा narrow है. Even they failed to show the non-material culture. See, again it comes to the same thing. सब बोल रहे हैं कि non-material culture का भी diffusion हो रहा है, but we haven't seen a single person defining which culture. ठीक है ना? For example, we have taken so many material examples, but no non-material culture का example anybody has given. And they gave more emphasis on the geographical area, because of course area की बात ज़्यादा कर रहे हैं. For example, there are ways today that diffusion is occurring in the cultures that are far apart from each other, and which have no you can say geographical connect, right? But wo diffusion they could not explain. They only stick themselves, they were only thinking in terms of area, कि जो diffusion area में हो रही है, जो एक दूसरे के पास पास हैं उधर diffusion हो रही है, right? And not pan world diffusion, इन्होंने उसकी बात नहीं की. So no worldwide diffusion, they didn't talk about it. So I hope you understand. Now इसमें एक last, the person is Kroeber. Clark Wissler का हमने देख लिया in the क्लार्क वाइजलर वी हैव स्टडीड इन अमेरिकन स्कूल, फ्रांस बोआज का आइडिया हमने देख लिया है. लास्ट इज क्रोबर, इट इज़ ओनली गोइंग टू टेक 5 more minutes guys, do not get confused, and if you are, please watch the video again, I am sure you're going to understand it. So now kroeber, अभी तक हम जो बातें कर रहे हैं बड़ी ज़्यादा लोकलाइज्ड बातें कर रहे हैं, बिकॉज दे वर ट्राइंग टू टेल वेरी लोकलाइज्ड व्यू. कैसे, मैं बताती हूँ. सी ब्रिटिश स्कूल में दे वर टॉकिंग हीलियोसेंट्रिक, वो थोड़ा पैन वर्ल्ड का बात कर रहे थे कि वन सेंटर एंड रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड डिफ्यूजन. जब ऑस्ट्रो-जर्मन आया एंड देन उसके बाद अमेरिकन में क्लार्क वाइजलर भी आया, तो ये थोड़े लोकलाइज्ड हो गए, बिकॉज उनको ब्रिटिश का आइडिया पसंद नहीं आया ऑफ दिस वेरी एक्सट्रीम व्यू. सो इन्होंने थोड़े लोकली डिफ्यूजन को एक्सप्लेन करने की कोशिश की. नाउ even though kroeber has similar ideas like American school, but he took again a macro view. So he also was interested in the world over diffusion and not very local diffusion. ठीक है, now we'll see how. So he says there are changes that are brought by in one culture through the other. ठीक है, and they can be asymmetrical. Asymmetrical would be when one person is a passive culture and other is the active one. अब मैंने बताया था उस दिन, active would be the one who is constantly giving and passive is the one who is constantly taking, and there is this asymmetric relationship. That means equals का relationship नहीं है. For example, in India, British were trying to impose or try to force their culture on us, right? So वो asymmetrical relation हुआ, and he was trying to show the changes at macro level. So he called basically a civilization as a culture complex. Now what is this? Basically he took a very wide view of diffusion. So he is saying, for example, Indus Valley civilization. Okay, let's not take Indus Valley civilization, let's take the Vedic era. In Vedic era basically क्या हो रहा है? There was early Vedic era and then there was later Vedic era. ठीक है, and then there was the time of Mahajanpads in the later Vedic era only. Janpads and Mahajanpads का time आ गया. Mahajanpads, ठीक है, ये time था, example ले रहे हैं. ठीक है, so he is calling this whole civilization as a culture complex. Of course there were so many concepts. Brahminism का concept था, जाति का concept था, then there was chaturvर्ण system going on, then there were so many things going on, right? So he said civilization is a culture complex and emerges from a lot of borrowings. Of course कुछ ideas were evolved, कुछ हम बोलेंगे जब Aryans आए, then Aryans का Indianization हुआ, Indianization of Aryans and Aryanization of Indian tribes, right? All of this was what? There were cultural borrowings, everybody was evolving together, and there was a culture complex. And slowly what happens is, when there is a culture, it keeps on borrowing from its neighbors, it keeps on borrowing from the ideas of other cultures, and then finally a time comes where culture achieves its highest position. That is the time which he says is the culture climax. That means culture is saturated, and that time it stops to take in any other thing. That means that time it stops to borrow. For example, हम बोलते हैं Mahajanpads, and the time where the culture got so much saturated कि there were so many ideas of Brahminism, Jativad, all of that, right? So it became arrogant. We are not talking about Vedic era became arrogant. In general, he is saying that the cultures, after it has received, after it comes to its apex position, that means when it fully evolves and becomes saturated, so it becomes arrogant, and then it starts to fall, because after that it does not take in, it does not absorb the ideas from outside, and it starts to fall. For example, in these times the reactionary ideas from the Jain dharma, ठीक है, then Ajivikas, then Buddhism. So what was this? This was the reaction against the saturated culture that was there. So I hope you are understanding कि it is saying every civilization is a culture complex and it has a journey. That means एक civilization पहले बनती है, a civilization borrows from a lot of things, a lot of ideas from it, has some own ideas, some ideas get diffused to it, it goes to its highest position, which is called the culture climax, where it gets saturated, it thinks it is very superior, then it stops to borrow from other cultures, it becomes arrogant to other culture, it closes its wall to other cultures, and then its journey to decline starts. And फिर again when it will decline, it will start to take in the ideas and borrowings from other, and it will again go. So ऐसे चलता है, right? So this was the idea which was given by Kroeber, and उसने diffusion बताया कि borrowings time से, you know, in every culture borrowings will take place and it will contribute to the culture getting to its climax, then it will close its doors, fall, and this cyclical journey happens. So this was the idea of Kroeber, which was taken forward by Robert Redfield in its Little and Great Traditions. That is the part of paper 2, उसमें हम पढ़ लेंगे. That's not the part for this part, this topic right now. So I hope you're clear with the diffusionist school, guys. I have put in a lot of effort to make you understand. I hope you have understood it. तो आप फिर से एक बार देख लेना if you did not understand. And अभी हम एक last evaluation, we'll do the evaluation of whole diffusionist school. This was gradually replaced by more holistic ideas in the 19th centuries, because अभी हम जैसे पढ़ रहे हैं ना, हम sequence में पढ़ रहे हैं, sequence of time also. पहले classicals आए, classical evolutionists आए, they gave their ideas, it was the very beginning, and the anthropology as a subject had just started, there were new ideas that were coming in, then इनको diffusionist ने अपना you know criticism दिया, they gave their own ideas, and then more relevant ideas over the time will come, we'll see, right? जब हमने बोला था कि from diachronic to more synchronic studies would start, right? Synchronic मतलब present से related, and diachronic means थोड़ा historically देखना, ठीक है, चीज़ों को. So from historical perspective to more present oriented, future oriented studies, more function, what is the need of it, वैसी holistic ideas आने लगे आगे जाके. So but even then it still holds value, because diffusion is a thing which does take part. ऐसा तो नहीं है कि everybody invents everything on its own, it borrows also. So the idea, the core idea तो is valid, right? So acculturation के बारे में हमने समझा, how the cultures try and impose their ideas on the others. So that is also a relevant concept. We have seen it happening all over the colonial times, even till today, right? Globalization may be, there are so many times cultures impose the powerful cultures try to impose themselves through hard power, soft power. So you just make that ideas in your mind. And how the rise and fall of civilization happens, ये Kroeber ने explain किया, right? So all in all, the ideas were very novel at that time when they came in. They held relevant, and some of them still holds relevance, right? So I hope you have understood the lecture, like the lecture, guys, and if you did, please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you.